Go live. All right.
We will go ahead and call to order the Appropriations Committee of June 28th, 2023, 1923. Holy crap. That was your reference to the picture. Today, we're here to talk about what is now being referred to as the downtown recreation area. And really, as I go back and read through the materials that the mayor put together for us, and hopefully everybody on the committee had a chance to read through the two documents that she sent out. I thought it was a really good recap, number one, of all the flood mitigation information all in one place. That was great. Nice to reread that after all these years and time that we've been involved with it. And which ultimately leads us to this conversation about properties that we're looking at acquiring or getting from the county. So we've got really two different issues here. We've got the properties that we're looking at, which is one issue. We also have then the request that the mayor is making for additional funds to be appropriated for the continuing engineering of the recreational area. And that's what we are here to discuss today. So, teeing that up, Mayor.
Thank you.
Full speed ahead.
Yes, so I won't go through the detail, as Jeff said. Hopefully you guys all had an opportunity to review the documents. A couple of quick items just to kind of tee up the conversation. So we're going to start with a little trivia. I promise I will go quickly, but how many acres of property do you think the ball diamonds out at the Q Bar? So just the baseball diamonds and Miracle Field. Any guesses on how many acres that is? Any guesses? Nobody wants to be wrong. 5 acres?
25.
25 acres? 15. Jim, do you have 10? All right, so it is 19 acres. So it is about the same space as the downtown recreation area. So again, as we look at this area, it is obviously the primary focus is the flood mitigation, right? As we bench this, we want to make sure that it is providing maximum flood benefit, but we also don't want to have 19 acres of property that's sitting empty in our community. So this is a prime opportunity for us to make an investment in our community that is significant, and I believe will also provide great physical, mental health benefits, but additionally spur economic development and help continue to set us apart as a community that can attract the workforce that we want for tomorrow, the type of businesses that we want. We are definitely seeing businesses as they are coming and meeting with us and talking about locating in our community, asking what the recreational amenities are. And we've, mentioned this project to a couple of the ones that have been looking, and they're like, this is awesome. Like, I know Rob was in that meeting where the COO of the company said, this is amazing. This is exactly what we want to see in a community. How could we tie our campus into this if we came to Finley? So I think that this is a really big opportunity for us. Obviously, over the last couple of years, as we've been talking about this, then moving forward with the conceptual designs, looking at what amenities make sense in this area, there's a very broad range of what we could invest here. So the one thing I wanted to just point out, so the picture in the top left corner is downtown Finley in 2007. This is specifically the Rainick building right there. No, that's a different screen. Yeah, no, we're good. I checked.
Okay,
you're good. So that's the downtown. And then the map on the right, where it's pink and yellow, the yellow is the current 100-year flood map. The pink is with the various flood mitigation projects, the new flood map. So you can see all of that yellow area is eventually, estimated to be removed from the floodplain. That's about 2,000 parcels that would no longer be in the floodplain, which is significant because they wouldn't be required to have flood insurance. Their property becomes more valuable, all of those things that are really important. Here's another picture, the project area that we're talking about. Obviously, this is the old brewery building that has since been removed. In this picture, you can also see the pedestrian bridge. And as we talk about this project, a couple of things that I want to point out. The project proposal for the downtown recreation includes relocating and building a new skate park, which we're going to need to do in the next couple of years regardless. Our existing one is in bad shape. It's not in a good area. Studies show you need to move it out into the open. We see a lot more kids utilizing it, even at younger ages. Additionally, the Riverwalk, that is the Hancock Public Park District's Riverwalk, that would be part of it. We have talked to them about being involved in the project, both from an ongoing maintenance as well as some potential financial support to get the Riverwalk replaced and better lit, as well as then a significant component, as many of you remember, is the pedestrian bridge. And this is an opportunity for us to relocate, get a new pedestrian bridge that is going to be better long-term, more iconic, and really change kind of the horizon of our downtown. But each of those things are projects that we need to look at doing regardless. We're going to have some sunk costs on them in the next couple of years. So making this investment, and I just pulled some fast facts, some of the estimates. The estimates on just the bridge, skate park, and Riverwalk, if we just did basics and did them as separate projects, is probably close to $3 million. So, and then on the high end, those three pieces could be $10 million. And that's just kind of based off of the current finances. So one of the key considerations, the three takeaways and kind of questions that I felt like we all continued to have and wanted to resolve was, at the last Appropriations Committee meeting, we specifically said we needed documentation that all of the properties would be transferred to the city by completion of the benching. The commissioners did pass the resolution back in April stating that would occur. Obviously, that would occur upon our signature. Additionally, yesterday, they passed the MOA that specifically states that they will continue to be responsible for the benching project, and then that they will transfer the properties to us after completion of that. So I will be bringing that to you all here in the next couple of weeks. The next item was the environmental concerns on these properties. So as you will see here, I just have the summary statements. First, I just want to define, a REC, because I know the document says a REC. That just means a recognized environmental condition. So it could be something as simple as somebody poured buckets of paint in a specific hot spot. It could be something more severe, like the chromium at the Rainick building, which then all of the dirt has to be removed and taken to a special hazardous waste material site. When we talk about a phase 1 environmental study, that means just a basic study. Maybe some samplings have been taken. They look at the history of the property, a lot of known information, do interviews, and they do an assessment of, do they believe there's an environmental hazard? Based off of that, then they would move into a phase 2, where you actually go in and do more water and soil samples, dig deeper and gather that type of information to be able to make an assessment. And then obviously remediating it is just taking necessary steps to make sure that it's not an impact to the community. So as we look at the properties, and let me see if I can move that box. So there are 8 properties. I don't know if we can move it. It's not a big deal. 8 properties that are currently in the city of Findlay's name that, based off of the records from American Rescue Point, no phase 1 was completed because there's no contamination expected. They said, we've looked at this, you don't even need to do a full phase 1. It's been residential properties, no concern. The other properties, I think it's the 2 parcels, is the Rainick property. And so those are obviously then already prepared to be remediated before the benching begins through the state brownfield grant. Looking at the additional 89 parcels that the county currently has and would be transferring into our name. The no recs means that a phase 1 was completed and they said there's no recs. The mediated, obviously 14 parcels that they identified some sort of issue, they've already addressed it. So a couple of those are the underground storage tanks. No phase 1, no contamination expected. There were 38 parcels, no phase 1. They said, yep, there's probably something going on, something minor here. We don't even need to do a phase 1 because it's going to be addressed during the benching. You're going to remove the soil that, would be a concern. And then the last one is, yes, there is a wreck that is known and it will be addressed as part of the benching. So here it is in a map. These are the parcels that are specifically kind of being looked at in the benching area. The green with the yellow lines are the ones that have no RECs. The light green are no phase 1, no contamination expected. The orange are ones that there is believed to be a contamination and will be addressed during the benching. And the blue are properties that are already remediated. All right, so I will just touch briefly on this. I know all of you have been very involved in the strategic planning conversation. I think it's important to note that, this is something, this area, park improvements, recreation opportunities, outdoor spaces is something that we've continued to hear. Public beautification, creating, resolving flood mitigations. This project, I feel like, was mentioned a couple of different places in here, though not always specifically, but in general. So I think that that's important to show. As we went through the process to develop where we are today, the master plan concept, I just wanted to reiterate some of the key items. First of all, we made sure that we looked at, and our consultant looked at all of the parks that we have in our community, so they weren't taking away from other things. I know I've heard from a couple of folks, why would we put an amphitheater here when we have the band shell at Riverside? So I think it's important to show, like, first of all, when we talk about an amphitheater, it could look very different. One, it can't be enclosed, so it's not going to really be a band shell environment. But think of a space downtown where we hear all the time, how can we get events, kickoffs off of Main Street? How can we have that gathering space? How can we have, yoga classes on a controlled environment? Can we do educational classes down by the rivers? And so kind of what's proposed here is something like that. And I think we see this as an opportunity to not steal from the band shell, but build upon it, especially because this would be able to accommodate a larger group than the existing park. Additionally, it's creating that connectivity. Having lots of parks throughout the community is really important, and each of them kind of serving a different purpose. So again, we've been working on this since April of 2022. One of the key elements that we really need to define is depending on where we put certain things, the excavation during the benching is going to look differently. And so rather than, having them do the project as is, and then us coming back in a year and having to pay to move, additional dirt or more dirt, we want to make sure that we're marrying these up as much as possible to save taxpayer dollars. All right, so obviously right now what we're discussing is getting approval for moving forward with the downtown recreation area, and specifically the appropriation of, so previously it was 1.3. We need 1.3 to move forward. I put 1.5 just because really we're going to start, appropriating funds over the next couple of years would be the ask. But even if we do that today, obviously going through the readings, we wouldn't be entering into an agreement until at least August. Then it's, they're going to take many months to work through the 30% design. That's all the detail. That's where we start going through the different elements and refining materials, etc. I would say, during that time, we're going to have multiple outreaches where we start refining. We'll have these types of committees, committee of the whole, community surveys, some of those to start refining some of the elements. This also allows us to have a kind of a rough plan with a better refined cost estimate for going out and getting state capital funding, different park grants, talking to local businesses, as well as some local, organizations who may be interested in supporting this. Then the 60% would be approximately in 2024. This is when the benching would also be occurring. And we wouldn't have final designs and be able to begin construction until 2025. So these projects obviously take a long time to get together and keep moving. So as we look at, and I know we've talked a couple of times about the cost estimates are just that. They are, broad estimates, and anyone who's been in, done a large scale project like this or built a home, anything like that, you recognize that there's a very broad range of what can go into a project like this. So right now, estimates are from 10 to 40 million, assuming that we did all of the things currently in the concept, right? So that's redoing the planning court, that's having multiple parking lots, that's the amphitheater, that's the bridge, that's all of those different elements. So we may decide as we go through it that instead we want to phase the project, or something's not as important to us, we want to remove it. Additionally, it includes a 30% contingency as well as their professional fees, which are typically about 10% for engineering, design, et cetera. This also did include an inflation increase. So I'm feeling pretty comfortable that we're going to be able to work within that. And again, my recommendation is that the city wouldn't put more than $10 million into it unless we saw, a crazy influx of cash for something. But I think that $10 million would be appropriate, and we would be setting that aside over a couple of years. One thing I had heard from a couple of folks is, well, if you're committed to 10 million, why wouldn't you just put in 10 million? Well, from my perspective, our money should, we put in the money to get it going, and then hopefully our money is last money in. We're able to leverage outside dollars, and if we refine it down and somebody comes up and says, here's a check for 30 million, well, then we probably don't need to put our money in, and we can spend it on other things. So I think we can start planning and setting it aside, but I also don't think that we should necessarily okay, we're setting, $10 million aside today. I think that's something that we can all just keep in mind and kind of plan for as we're putting together capital budgets and looking at the next couple of years. I know pretty much everybody has seen it. Again, this is just kind of the overview layout. These are some of the key elements, as you can see in this design. Again, it's kind of open air where then it's hooked up to be able to add in sound systems for events, different things like that. Park area, splash pad, playground, then the skate park elements, gateway area, and then obviously the pedestrian bridge, that kind of iconic item. Obviously, again, I won't go into all these details, they're in the document, but there is significant economic impact from making an investment like this. And so I think that's really a key opportunity, and I certainly wouldn't be making a recommendation to spend such significant dollars if I didn't feel like it was going to be, a real investment and payoff for our community in the long run. Discussion.
Questions? Right, Jim.
Could you call up the map?
Yeah, can you make sure to speak up since we're streaming?
Call up the map, the environmental map.
Yeah.
Couple things. I want to approach this from, I guess, the point of view, let's ask the question. If something happens and we can't afford to clean this up with regard to the environmental, does it make sense to spend 1.3 million out of 4 million for design for a potential $10 million investment? That's really a question you folks are going to need to answer for yourselves today. And I do think we're missing a couple pieces here, and I want to share some information with you just from what's been distributed to me. Has anyone reviewed the phase ones that the mayor made available to you? Because if so, that's a benefit. You did. Some of the stuff will look familiar to you. One of the questions I had out of the recreation proposal was on page 3, it talks about the railroad bridge, talks about the estimate cost for the project currently is $12 million as of June 2023. Says the project will be funded through 4% Hancock County sales tax of flood mitigation. Commissioners informed me they have $2 to $2.5 million available for that. That's what they set aside for the railroad bridge. And then a $7 million grant, that's 9 to 9.5. So we got a $3 million gap on the railroad bridge that we haven't talked about. So one of my questions is going to be, is that money coming from us?
So I can comment on that. So first of all, we've been having discussions with Norfolk Southern, that this is their infrastructure. So we've been in conversations with that. And obviously I have not come to you all with a request, but I do have a figure in mind set aside to be able to contribute towards flood mitigation projects if necessary. About $5 million I'm currently kind of keeping earmarked in case we need to contribute.
So that should be part of this discussion as well, in my opinion, because it's all part of the same. Because I guess, and I don't know, I'm not part of the engineering of the project, but if we don't do the railroad bridge, does this benching even matter? In other words, because the railroad bridge is the choke point.
Yeah, the railroad bridge will be moving forward. We need to put money into it. We will be
have to
making
fund
that
that.
happen.
So we're going to have to put that money in. So rather than talking about 10, we're really talking about 15 million here today, because that has to happen for us to move forward.
Well, again, I expect Norfolk Southern to pony up some funds. And even per your last finance report, when we look at projecting based off of early revenue projections from last year, our end of year revenue carryover in the general fund is $23 million. If we back out our $9 million reserve target, we have $14 million in general fund. That, again, that's kind of where I'm saying, okay, we're kind of holding $5 million out of that. We're probably going to put some general fund dollars for some other things. For example, Hat Trick has about $900,000 coming out of general fund, and then investing into the park a couple $1 million, but a couple, in smaller chunks.
So in looking at this, for the benefit of the council, when you look at the whole picture, which is what I'm encouraging you to do, and have been encouraging you to do the last several months, these are other pieces that we really can't omit when we're having a conversation. Now, that being said, part of this is, let's take this down to a simpler level for the folks playing along at home to think about. When you buy a home, you wouldn't buy a home generally anymore without a home inspection. In this case, the home inspection is the phase 1 study that was done. And sometimes I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding on phase 1, phase 2s. Phase 1s don't include digging, they don't include probing. Phase 1s are generally a rec, and as defined by the American Structure Point document, it says a rec or a site of those properties where the presence or likely presence of any hazardous substance or petroleum products on a property under conditions that indicated existing release, past, present, da, 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 da. In other words, they didn't do any digging. There's been no digging done under a phase 1 when you review the reports. However, in reviewing the reports, what I did was I took a look and I went through parcel by parcel for the parcels identified in the benching area, which you see on the screen there today. And I labeled those A through M on this document. And for those of you who are interested, I'm happy to share it with you. If anybody would like one on the committee. I don't have tons of copies here. I believe there's 9 copies. And what these are, the summaries here on this, are exactly the verbiage under each of these properties as listed in the phase 1 documents. Okay. So, for example, the first one says the presence of potentially contaminated subsurface fill related to the relocation of the Blanchard River is considered a recognized environmental condition. Some of you will have to share if when they're very one extra up here, I'll share with you. Sorry, I didn't make more than that. I think I need more than this thing. Oh, you got one?
Yeah,
okay.
Grant.
Okay, thanks, Grant. So if you take, for example,
Don't trip on that corner.
thank you, I would. The very first picture is this property here, and it's easy to omit. It probably shouldn't be omitted. But if you take a look at that, on that, it says A and B at the top. So A and B says the presence of potentially contaminated subsurface fill related to relocation. And then B talks about the potential for surface contamination from abandoned orphan tanks, drums, household hazardous waste, and debris from the August 2007 fund. This is the one where in the phase 1, it talks about a Superfund record being created. And one of the things I argued for in the letter I gave you for this property and a couple of these properties here, it said there was an event in the 2007 flood at 100 Jefferson Street that caused a Superfund record to be created.
What is this?
There are no Superfund records on record in Hancock County. You can go to the US EPA website. A Superfund site is a designated hazardous site.
Well, I have from the EPA the information obtained today because of your question today. And what they said is there was an event, they came in, they did something. It's not a Superfund site. It's a record that was created under this surplus program or whatever. What we need to know, what you need to know, in my opinion, is that record clear and is there no further action with regard to the information on what was done with regard to the 2007 flood? And as in here, it says there were barrels and the barrels were spilled and they don't know where that went. So let's clarify
And
that.
we know that the barrels came from that area.
All I know is
We don't know where those barrels came from.
excuse me, Randy, the phase 1 says it's an outstanding issue. If you look at the top of the first page, it says we're sitting here saying there are no issues with regard to environmental. However, The phase one clearly says, done by American Structural Point, 2011, it was done for the engineering study. It says this phase one assessment has revealed no evidence of recognized environmental conditions connected with the property except for the following. And those are bullet point listed here in A through M below. These are not my things. I am not the messenger here. This is the report. This is what the report you have access to says. So you take another property in the benching area. And let's skip to one that we acquired that I wasn't even aware we acquired. And that's this property here, adjacent to the plating company. Okay? That is F, the unknown source of content of fill materials underlying the property and the proximity to Superior Plating, a former chrome plating facility with soil contamination, is considered a recognized environmental condition for this property here. There are a number of those. I've given you a number of those, and this is not a thorough engineering study of that phase one. But there's enough here to make the point that I desire to make as your fiscal officer. And that is, if you're doing a home inspection and your home inspection, like in this case, says, hey, there are potential problems. Your roof potentially is a problem and your furnace is a problem. Are you going to spend the money on paying for a deposit that's non-refundable on the landscaping in the pool before you know if you have enough money to fix the roof and the furnace? That's what we're talking about here. I think we've got the cart before the horse with regard to this request. I have no problem. I have no issue with what we're looking at doing. I think it's going to be wonderful when we get to it. But I think to do our due diligence and represent the taxpayer properly, consideration needs to be given to, number one, all through this area and all through the phase one reports, they've listed A through M, a number of environmental items. The phase one was not done. The phase one was done according to the report for the Corps of Engineers. It was done because it was a requirement as part of the potential projects that were going to be done with the Corps involved in flood mitigation for us. So that being said, we weren't talking about a phase two benching project in 2011, were we? Nobody was talking about it. But the Corps did a phase one from somewhere around Broad Avenue all the way across town to the east side of town and identified these areas. So here we are now later, looking at wanting to do a project that's a good project. It makes a lot of sense from some aspects. From the fiscal aspect, that's a different question altogether. But cleaning up the downtown, everybody wants to see the downtown improved, and we want to see the river improved. But again, does it make sense to spend money prior to completing a commonsensical approach to understanding what you're doing? And what I'm suggesting this body consider. Number one, we now know that we're looking at an additional $5 million asked for the railroad. We know that we're talking about $4 million in design on a potentially minimum $10 million part. $4 million in design may or may not be exorbitant, depending who you are and how you approach it, but it seems like a lot to me. The question is, doesn't it make more sense, or would it be more prudent in terms of protecting the taxpayer to take this area, this entire benching area used to be the river. And you've all seen the map. I hope by now you've seen the map that it used to be the river. If that's the case, we do some testing, some phase two testing, or hire an expert to advise us as to where to do phase two testing, who is a fiduciary to us. The mayor is not an expert in environment. I am not an expert in environment. I can certainly read these reports, but I read them a lot differently than the mayor does. I have some background in real estate and understanding what we're doing and where we're going from that perspective in property acquisition. So with that being said, you move forward, you clearly identify where hotspots might be, where you should look for them. And the phase one, they're saying these are areas where there's items of note with regard to environmental considerations on these properties. Identify where the hot spots are. If there are none, that's awesome. We move forward. If there are, identify associated cost with what it would take to clean them up and move forward. I have a major concern, and I think it is irresponsible for us to say to the taxpayer, we think there might be likely environmental issues, but we're going to handle them as part of the benching project and go in blind. Now, if you do that though, if this body chooses to do that, be forewarned. Two things will happen. If we identify significant environmental issues, we will have to put them in our financials. And they will become a consideration should debt be needed as we move forward with different projects that we want to do. This is not something you can bury if you discover it. And think about that. Is it prudent? Does it make sense to move forward and acquire property that we don't need to acquire to do the benching, that we have a partner in the need to remediate in the county currently, and we can protect ourselves and not just put Finley's taxpayers on the hook when the county is a partner in this with regard to the county-wide effort that needs to be done, and they would have to participate with us. And isn't it easier, wouldn't it make more sense to work together to find funding sources if there is a need for additional funding? The county has a limited amount of money left. They put $4.5 million, they told me, for flood mitigation here for benching, and $2 to $2.5 million for the railroad bridge. That's it, not a penny more. And they're not in a position. And the words are, they're saying, I don't know what Wilson's saying because he doesn't represent our fiduciary interest. He's working on a project. If we need more than that, we're going to have to find it. So my argument is, and my thought for you folks is, don't buy the house without completing the inspections. Know what it's going to cost. Go in wise and move forward.
So if I may just kind of touch on a couple items. So first of all, as I stated at the beginning, with the property specifically, what was requested by this body was just to have documentation and assurances that the properties after the projects would be able to be transferred to the city. So I'm comfortable with the documentation that we have from the county at this point in time with the MOA, as well as the resolution that they passed to say, yes, we will get the properties when the time is right. We don't need to take on them right now. So that helps with your statement about having a partner and being able to address them. Second of all, the benching project, as Stantec has worked to identify how do they complete this project. They have reviewed the phase 1s and 2s, and that is one of the reasons that we went out and got the brownfield dollars to remediate the Rainick property. If further items are identified as they dig, given that they're going to be removing at the lowest spots 10 feet down from the existing, surface level up to then kind of going through it, if they start identifying things, it is going to be addressed. And if it's addressed, then we would work with them to identify additional brownfield dollars and work to get it remediated. From my perspective, exactly what you said, Jim, this is a project that eventually is going to need to be done. And I would be all in favor of continuing to move forward, recognizing that it takes significant time. And as they go through, though I find it very unlikely that they're going to identify significant issues, we then work to address those, and we still have the plans and engineering, which are going to have to be executed at some point regardless. Again, going back to whether we phase it at some point or we say that it's here, I do not see that as a wasted money. I see that having plans put together, shovel-ready projects, which is something we've always prided ourselves on doing, because that puts us in a position to bring in outside resources to get things done in our community. I completely understand your concerns. And, I'm not pushing for the city to take on liability that is unreasonable. I think we have sufficient enough information based off of the assessments, because they did it, Sandy, you specifically mentioned it. Some of the properties that they said there are environmental concerns on, it's simply that they were near something else that, had a spill. And, these are not, hazardous material. We're going to start growing multiple head type of spills. They're old auto body shops and tires and different things. So, I understand what you're saying. I just think that we can do both in tandem, and that, recognizing that we can get that done. And, I'm hoping that, we're able to get in additional funding on the flood mitigation projects. That is the top priority. So if certain other things get delayed, then they get delayed. But I think that moving forward, to be prepared to keep this going is prudent.
I think you illustrate very well where we disagree. area is filled. The phase one report confirms multiple places the entire area is
Which means
filled.
the
And by
project's
doing-
accounted for
And by,
assessment then.
and the only areas we've done phase two is around the grading. So I'm suggesting we take that next step, do some probing via phase twos,
All right.
identify those areas and move forward before we commit additional dollars so that we can understand it. And that's exactly where we differ. Other than that, in terms of the project itself and the park and everything else, we don't have a dog in that hunt. I just need to make sure we spend money properly.
So what we have is just the difference between when would we appropriate or when would we spend 1.5 million? Mayor saying, look, we're going to do it at some point in time, regardless of the properties being cleaned up. It'll get cleaned up at some point in time. It's just a matter of, the planning's got to be done. Doing it now versus waiting till after all the properties are done and are cleaned up and acquired. So do them in tandem versus waiting, as Jim's suggesting, that we wait until everything's pristine and then looking at the world then.
Not pristine, when we have phase two's done and we have an
Pristine
understanding of
is
the
phase
cost.
two. And then you've got all your liability under control.
Well, you know where it's at, and what it's going to cost. You have some idea of your whole all-in
And in the
cost. above
environmental
and
world,
beyond
that's
50
pristine.
million.
So
I've never heard that term, but okay.
pristine is phase
Fair
two
enough, yeah.
cleanup is the background.
Yeah, I'm not an engineer, environmental
Yeah.
engineer, so.
I doubt it. So anyway, so that's where we're at. Questions?
Since you kind of are involved with some environmental stuff, what would the cost of the phase two be to have that done? The testing.
Rob, any idea what phase two costs?
I
mean, I wish-
What, 10,
Well,
probably
the
10,000?
scale,
Yeah, I think you can actually get a cost per site, essentially, or cost per boring. Because what you're doing is you're drilling into the ground, taking core samples out, and saying, okay, this thing looks like this underneath. That's what you're doing. And those come with costs. And what did you say, Mayor?
I think our most recent one was like 10 to 17, yeah. It was like mid.
Does that sound about right, Ross?
I guess my only comment again to that would be is that the companies that have been working to design and plan and budget for this project as our experts have already had access to all of this information and believe that the project can be addressed during their bid process and that additional environmental wasn't needed to move forward with the project. So again, I guess in my opinion, I trust those experts that do this every day to say, yes, a phase two was necessary to make sure that when we get into this project, we're not gonna lose money on doing this project because we're gonna bid it out at a certain cost, knowing the environmental concerns and that that's going to raise the cost if we're wrong on what we see. So and that, my extra little note I had in the packet when I first sent it out accidentally was, okay, we're saying we might need to do an additional environmental study to feel comfortable with moving forward. And if that's ultimately what this committee decides, okay, I'm cool with that. But again, recognizing that we're going to be excavating like 10 feet deep in the majority of this area, that then, okay, so I'm not the environment. So how would they then say, okay, well, we've already done your assessment once and we didn't have anything beyond what we've provided you. How are we now going to we said you didn't need to do it, sure, we'll take your money and get it done regardless, but what are they gonna provide different?
Well, we haven't done the assessment once. That's the point. We haven't done a phase two in any area other than the rating. And those groups, they're in the business of making money doing projects. They're going to write.
Wait,
They're gonna,
don't cast aspersions on a company that's.
I didn't cast
professional doing
aspersions on any company.
That's what you just
No,
did.
I did not. You didn't listen to my sentence. I said, no company worth their salt, then you cut me off, is going to write a contract that is going to cause them to lose money if there's something outside the scope of that agreement that's environmental. They're going to write it so they make money regardless. And I would expect them to write it that way. What I'm saying here is we need to dot our I's, cross our T's, do our phase twos, the fiduciary duty we need to do to our taxpayer. And if necessary, the contractors are not a fiduciary to us. They're out in a business to make money doing a project for us. They're not a fiduciary to us. If we need a fiduciary then hire somebody to represent us and protect us from the environmental issues. But if we are comfortable, it still would not be responsible to move forward without understanding, because as you're saying, we're going to remove 10 foot of dirt. How we remove that dirt goes to the environmental issue, how that dirt has to be handled and what is found there, where that dirt has to go, how it has to be processed. We don't know. We're going in blind, but what we do know, and is clear from the phase 1, is that entire benching area, almost the entire benching area, is filled. And it says in there, the city was in the habit of using municipal waste to fill holes in the 30s. Period.
Okay. So, Jim, I think you talk about a fiduciary. Any environmental company that you hire is not going to be a fiduciary to the city. You hire them to do a job. They're going to give you a report. You make your judgment based on that. There's no fiduciaries involved here.
They're interested in making money. So we can
That's
hire,
everybody, but there is no fiduciary.
you would hire an attorney. You would hire an environmental attorney to protect our interests if
But
you
that's
want a
different,
fiduciary.
though.
That's a different issue.
That's a completely different issue.
No, but that's my point. The way the argument is being put forth, we are protected because we're doing this dirt, and I trust these professionals that are going to move the dirt for us. They're not fiduciaries to us. There's nothing to trust. If we want that trust level, if we want to be able to put our trust into a professional, you need to hire a fiduciary. What I'm saying is,
What is an attorney going to do for us?
irregardless of whether you do one or not, I'm not advocating that we do it. I'm saying if you want that level, you need to hire one.
But you are advocating for a fiduciary.
No,
So
I'm
tell me what a
advocating for phase
fiduciary-
2s.
No.
Yes.
You
Don't
keep
change my
saying
words.
fiduciary.
No, I'm saying, okay, let's clarify this.
Okay.
There's an argument on that side of the table that we're going to move forward, and I trust the experts, and we're going to be okay. This side of the table, I'm saying, you can't trust those experts to say we're going to be okay. They're in the business to make money, and they're going to write their contracts so they make money.
Okay.
So I'm saying, go in eyes wide open. Do your phase 2s, do your things. If you want that level of trust, you have to hire a fiduciary. We're going to have to hire somebody to protect us. I'm not advocating you do that.
Who is that?
It's irrelevant. That's
No,
not,
it's
I'm not
You keep bringing
advocating.
this up. I don't, and my point is, there is no fiduciary in this type of situation.
There could be. If you
So-
want one,
How?
you hire one.
So
Hire an attorney to read the dang reports for us? That makes no sense.
I'm not advocating. I'm saying you can
Where
have
does
a
a
fiduciary.
fiduciary, I'm trying,
Right now, the
what
fiduciary
I'm
should,
trying to get to, Jim,
As
is you keep
appropriations.
changing the rules here. So
no,
let's set out the rules. You want phase 2s on all the properties. That would satisfy you. Is that correct or not?
I don't know. What I want is, and you're not gonna put words in my mouth, what I want is us to move forward, eyes wide open. A phase 2 may lead to finding hotspots. If we find hotspots, I want estimates for cleaning them up.
Understood.
And then I want us to look at the whole thing, and I want to look at it with an eye and an amount of informed knowledge, where we can say, based on what we have, we think we can afford it, we have a plan for paying for it, and we're gonna go. Right now, you have a park that looks pretty. You have a plan to pay for the design, no plan for paying for the park. You have a railroad bridge that's gonna need $5 million from us. So add 5 to the 10, that's 15 million, and you have an unknown in terms of what environmental issues are gonna come up when we start turning dirt that we have to clean the minute we turn that dirt. And right now, the county's in it with us, which is good. So right now, you're at 15 million plus if you move forward with this project. And that's because we have no knowledge as to what it is. It's 15 million question mark.
Okay, so let me go back.
That's what I want. I want a clear idea of where we go from here. And I want a clear understanding of likely costs.
Okay, let me go back to the very first thing you said. You want phase 2s done on all of this. That satisfies you until we find out what something may be wrong after that, correct?
That is the first step. That's a good first step.
Thank
Yes.
you. Let's just stop there because
Sounds
the
good.
rest of it gets out of control and you have no idea what happens after that. So am I correct?
I don't know. I don't understand what you mean.
Well,
I don't think it's relevant.
Once a phase 2's done, then you actually know where you have to go. You just said that.
Yeah, with phase 2, we'll know if we need to collect further costs. Yes.
Right.
I guess going back to one of the prior requests specific to the city not taking the parcels until the benching project is done. I guess in my opinion, then isn't the environmental risk and responsibility still really with the county on the project? And so I would say that we continue to work with the county to move the phase 2 benching forward. if necessary, working with them to secure additional brownfield funding to remediate. And then if we identify some issue that we don't think is appropriately addressed, then I would be a proponent for phase 2 benching. But at this point, I feel like we're just throwing money at something that's already going to be addressed before we are really on the hook.
I would agree, except you left out a significant one, which is we acquired deed to the majority of the property in the middle. And it was done, as far as I can tell, without a council ordinance.
That's not
So
at all accurate. Jeff.
whether, if council ordinance is fine, that's fine, but I can't find it. But we acquired deed to a majority of this property in the middle, the yellow there. We acquired that deed, we opened ourselves up for that liability. And so I would not be comfortable moving forward without phase 2, since it's not a waste of money, because that is area filled with fill.
Yeah,
No,
I
no. I'm talking about Civitan Park. I'm talking about the park.
That's
Where
the
the
rating,
park.
but that's.
No.
No, so
no,
this is Rainick,
no.
and then that was the
Yeah.
property that
It's
was
very
received
clear.
from the park district, Civitan.
So we acquired
And
from here over, and this whole line here along the river from the park district.
that's what the park is.
In
now.
2021.
Yeah, it's-
So that is, and this is identified as fill and potentially leachate from here.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ironic that we already have a park on top of all this. That's been there for years.
Yeah, but we're not talking about digging it. The minute you turn dirt, it changes all the rules.
Yeah,
Can I change the subject?
Correct.
Okay, because we've already heard that we know we have environmental concerns on one side. And can I just talk about just the park and spending money? Because I'm not an engineer or whoever designs this kind of stuff isn't me, I'm just the accountant. But, okay, so it looks like we have a really pretty picture here. How much did we pay Strand to give us the pretty pictures?
oh golly.
Just
The previous contract amount to put together the initial concepts and do that process, that was under 100,000. I think they still have some on their contract,
okay.
but I don't recall. I could look
It's
back
fine.
at the
I'm just
appropriation.
curious, because, then we're gonna pay the 1.3 million, 1.5,
Which,
whatever.
can I just clarify one thing? So the design services are based off of a percentage of what your project ends up being. This initial amount is saying that based off of doing this entire concept, and I think that they are basing it off of a $30 million project right now. It's 1.3 to get to the 30%. So in the entire amount would be about, for their services, design, engineering, they do all the subcontracting for those services, the professional services, would be estimated to be about 10% of the total project, which is pretty standard.
Okay, and I wasn't questioning money. But what my question is, just, and maybe it's a stupid question, but I'll ask it anyway. So we're gonna pay 1.3 million to get 30% of a design done. What are we expecting out of that? What am I gonna see then? I mean, do we know?
Yeah, so 30% design is really like all the refining. It really is the meat and potatoes. That kind of 60, 90, 100% is the very detailed refining of your electrical drops are going there and your grade of your sidewalk is this. So the 30% really is, we would get another set of the pictures, the schematics, we would have the specific materials, we would have, that's really working through all of the details of the project. And they would say, okay, here is the specific shelter house you have picked out. It would go here, you're gonna need this much concrete, you're gonna have this electric. It's gonna be pretty refined at that point. So that's really the main engineering aspect of it would be, that's like laying out your sidewalks, figuring out the grades, figuring out all the plantings.
Based on this.
This
Pictures that we're
this
seeing.
concept, which has been developed through multiple meetings with the Park and Recreation and a number of community stakeholders to say, here's what we don't want, here's what we do want. And then they would go through component by component and kind of work through refining it. Good question.
So if you dial back the project and started as a phase 1, or you didn't go as in-depth with all of the wants and needs from everybody that came to Park and Rec and said, I want pickleball, I want skate park, I want splash pad. If you take it back to a certain area, does it change the price of the design for what you need to give to the engineers to do? 30%. to do it? Do we still have 4 million, or do you go down to a million and a half?
Yeah, it definitely is going to decrease. That's just an estimate, assuming that they work through the entire process with us on a $30 million project. Because they really are the ones that would be bringing in all of the different, to do the iconic bridge. Holly, I know you had really been a proponent of making sure that that's a feature and looking at, did we even want to connect it into other areas? But, obviously working through refining this component is going to look a lot different than if they start going through it and they say, okay, because, right now it's a very broad range. It could be a $2 million bridge, it could be a $12 million bridge. As we work through it and they say, okay, for your actual span, it's this. For your materials, it can be this. If you do a 10-foot wide versus a 12-foot wide, it's this. So there then engineering and iterations get refined and then they have kind of those fees. So it would decrease the overall engineering cost as well.
So hearing the numbers, and this was the first time I heard about the Norfolk Southern and possibly needing 5 million, which makes me think about the basin that we have as well. We are not even there yet. Where's the money going to come to build that? And we're maintaining it. Are we looking at throwing money that way as well? So to have a bridge, I think we need that. There's different ways we can go about it, but it's probably one of the biggest cost factors. But I just wonder if you take it back to Park and Rec, and now that you have all these other things that are in our pot for appropriations, do we scale the project into phases and only do the first phase to save some money on the design? Because the main reason for the design, if I'm wrong, tell me, but I thought it was when we're going to dig, starting in January to do the next benching stage, was to determine our curve and our.
That is a huge part of it. So let me hit on the basin real quick. So as you know, those estimates for that project is right around $60 million, and $60 million have been secured from the state. So I think if we see any significant changes to that price point, we have some opportunity to get some additional support. I wouldn't want us to stop moving forward with this. Again, I think these are the projects.
I never said stop.
Yeah, and then going to the phasing, I'm on board with us potentially phasing, but I think it would be doing us a disservice to say, let's pick and choose on the front end rather than working through the process. Again, going back to that point, if we can go out and say, this is our entire project and we're doing the pedestrian bridge and we're doing this, and we're able to go out and get it funded through state or federal grants or a donation from someone, and are able to do it all at once, wouldn't that be preferred? And if we don't, and if we don't, then we can say, okay, we're not going to do the pedestrian bridge for a while, and if we're able to get some funding, we're able to do that. I think once we have those better concepts, because as we work through the refining, you know what, we may decide we don't want that, or our taste is a little more, refined on the, we're able to get the cost down overall, and then our plan is we actually are able to afford it. Okay, we're not going to be able to do construction actually until 2027, and we have a bang up year, and something happens. So I think that moving forward with the design actually gives us more ability to hopefully get more done with less cost to us.
And I would just hate to do the big pie in the sky project and we go 5 years without making a decision and those become obsolete, the whole vision changes, you're back to square one. And I just think there's a lot of concern from the public on what the right number is. I don't think there's anybody against beautifying this area and making it usable. It's just appropriations. I'm looking at dollars, and after hearing all these couple things in here, I'm like, you guys got a lot of dollars floating around in the world with maybe that could be a lot more.
Great.
For my work in project management with Marathon, my wife's work in this, you do this four-phase project management where we're looking at our design phase. You do the entire design, and when you then implement, i.e. start building, that is when you start saying, you start bringing your financial constraints of construction into play and say, maybe we postpone the bridge for a certain amount of time, or as part of the design phase, you look at where your cost estimates. The design phase also better brings you entire cost estimates. So the fact that we want to, it's appropriate at this time to go into that design and continue to refine the project and refine the costs so that you can then look at how in implementation might stage the project over multiple years.
Do you feel that this project for the design phase is a reasonable cost, or have we looked at comparing what the cost for the design phase for the new courts or what we've done on other projects? Has it been this big of a dollar figure? Is it appropriate?
That's about right. I looked at it. I'm sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, my personal experience wasn't with IT projects, but talking with my wife who did a lot of physical build projects, she thought the design costs here were well in line, if not low. But you know, doing energy related projects versus parks is same church, different view kind of thing.
Typically 10 to 15% is
Yeah.
pretty standard on our, for the engineering and design component of our construction projects. Something else.
But if you skip on the design, what you get is a lousy end product. If all we want for this is none of this, just a raw feel.
I don't think that's.
And I don't think, so you gotta invest, the money you invest early in the design is saved later in implementation or build. I don't know, if you would echo that from your.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna add one other thing. So I think, an option for today's meeting is, the committee providing support for the design cost moving forward. We could also look at providing support for setting aside maybe $50,000 if necessary to work with the commissioners for environmental studies and remediation. But I would say that we should go back and talk to, I've had many conversations with them, but I think we could go back and say, if there are any spots that you believe need a phase 2 before you feel comfortable with bidding out the benching, then I think that we could say, we're here to support that effort. However, I think, shame on them if they haven't already had that conversation, because I know they're getting ready to bid out, which is one of the reasons I feel comfortable with not doing that. But if that is a real point of heartburn, I would feel comfortable with addressing it in that way.
I'd like to comment on that. I don't think that's the appropriate way. I think you need to commit yourself to doing the phase 2 in the appropriate locations as identified and pointed to by the phase 1. You have properties that you're talking about environmental ownership. I don't think you haphazardly do it. I think, again, it goes to, we need an expert that represents our interests to say, not that we feel comfortable, but say, based on this report, phase 1, phase 2s are appropriate in this ground at these intervals where you're going to bench. So you go in eyes wide open, and even if it's $100,000, if it saves us $3 to $5 million or more, because we identified spots and protected our interests, money well spent. And I don't think anybody could easily argue that it's not been well spent if we don't find anything, because we'll go on with a clear picture of what's going on, even if it's clean. But I don't think we go into it haphazardly, and I would be against that.
I don't think it's haphazardly, Jim.
Well, I think if we say what was just suggested, it is.
Well, I think, $50,000 in having phase 2 done honestly is a waste of money, because we've already got the phase 1s on all these properties and we're moving forward with a project that's going to address them based off of the reports we have. But I know that you keep saying that that's where we disagree. I think the issues are being addressed through the benching projects by the experts that have been looking and working on this for the last decade.
You're right, they'll be addressed, but at what cost? You have no idea. Until you have those phase 2s or you turn dirt, and you get stuck with the problem, you have no idea what it's going to cost. And that's what the potential. If we own it, if we own it,
We don't own them right now.
we own a significant chunk of that. That's what I just pointed out on that map.
I get it, but that's not all the all the items you have here. That's not all of them.
Excuse me.
That's not all of these. Most of this is owned by the county.
Irregardless of what's owned by the county, we own as much or more as the county in that area.
Wouldn't we want to concern ourselves with only what we owe?
No, I think we have,
Why
Finley
would we
taxpayers are at much at risk for the county.
But from a practical standpoint, I get it, Jim. I totally get your situation, where you're going here, but let's talk about this on a practical standpoint. We own the yellow piece of property.
That's one of the ones we own. We own more than that.
On the properties that we own, that are in your list.
That's not my list. That is the phase one of American
Okay,
Star.
you can, it's a list you handed out. How about that? Would we not be, if we own the property, we did the phase two on those properties, it makes sense. And we're clear with stuff that we already own. Correct?
I am not an environmental engineer or expert in that. I'm saying,
But I'm trying to
I'm
get
saying
you where
we're
you're
benching-
comfortable saying that you're okay to move forward with this process, okay?
I
And
think-
what I don't want, I'm trying to get a path forward, Jim, work with me here.
the path forward is.
No, the path forward, you keep changing that.
I've never changed
Direction.
it once. I have not. I've been consistent
You
in
want
what
the
I've
whole
said, and
thing.
it's on video. I've seen it 3 times myself. What I have said is, the area you're gonna bench, identify the areas, do the phase two.
We don't
do
own
the
all
phase
those
one.
areas.
Doesn't matter. Work with the county commissioners so that we go in eyes wide open, because the minute they turn dirt, they're liable too.
We're not liable. We don't own the property.
You're missing the point there.
Okay, show me the point.
The point is, you're gonna bench from that Martin Luther
Yeah,
King Bridge
I
all the
understand.
way to Main Street and beyond.
Yes.
Anytime that dirt is turned, it's creating environmental liability for the taxpayers of the city of
Potentially.
Finley. Yes. That being said,
Okay,
before that project happens, it would be prudent for the commissioners as well as us to jointly agree and do phase two testing, whether we pay for it, whether we pay for it jointly through that entire area, because we're going to end up owning it anyways. And go in eyes wide open on this project, because if additional funds have to be found, they have stated they don't have additional funds other than the railroad money. And if the railroad money goes away for an environmental issue after we start benching, then that's not 5 million anymore, it's 7.5 or 8 million. The number changes. So what I'm saying is, with regard to the commissioners, we need to step up and work with the commissioners as well on phase two process. We need to go in eyes wide open on the entire benching project.
so when Stantec says this is not an issue, looked at this,
They have not said that. I have not read that. The mayor has stated it, but I have not seen it or read it.
if Stantec is willing to come in here and start tearing dirt out, they've obviously done their job to figure out what's gonna happen when that happens.
I don't believe that for a second.
Because they're not a fiduciary?
Exactly.
Who is?
It's irrelevant. It's our job to protect the taxpayer. You're the fiduciary.
I get it. I am the fiduciary.
And that's why we went out and
That's
secured
why
the
we're trying to
brownfield
get
grant for the Rainick property.
Right.
The only property
If
was
we do find
identified to need
problems.
additional remediation.
That's not true. See, that's the misleading statement. The Rainick property is not the only property that was identified. It's the only property they did a damn phase two on. Okay, that's the point. The point is, the phase one says there's risk on other properties. Until you do the phase twos, you can't say what you just said. And that's why neither one of us are experts.
If we were to do phase two, and we find an issue, we'll get the same grant money that the Rainick property is getting on brownfield properties.
That'd be awesome.
So that's why they have super fund. That's why those funds exist at the state level.
So let's go in eyes wide open and do that in conjunction with the county.
Okay, so you agree
I think that would be
You
wonderful
agree.
if we did that.
that if we did phase two,
Phase twos across the benching area with the county, and we identify areas, we go after that money so it doesn't come out of our pocket. That would be a wonderful, perfect solution. That'd be a great solution. Yeah, I love that solution.
that takes your argument.
That's the right way to do it.
Thank you.
In his opinion.
Yeah.
I told you about that line, didn't I? What in the good wife, what the judge always said, they would always make him say, in my opinion, and I never understood why. Now I understand.
I'm grateful that as frustrating as this is sometimes for some of you, this is the discussion that has to occur at this level. You folks have to go.
So now that you guys are past that, I'm back to dollar numbers, and I just have a question, I guess, for individually everybody on appropriations. There's a lot of fires stakes in the fire, whatever we want to say, a lot of things going on that are big dollar amounts, potential $3 million project coming up for economic development, all the things that we just talked here today, potential of additional issues and railroads and all that, just these couple things. So does everybody on appropriations feel that if you move forward with this and you run into an issue, are you guys willing to say that, are you going to say that you're gonna increase taxes because we just hit you might have to. You might have to. We can be sitting great right now. We're past COVID dollars. We haven't used them all. I'm just talking in general to appropriations. This is big. And it's a lot of an ask. And is there a potential to the public that we'll have to raise taxes to cover any of these things?
I can tell you, Holly, you've mentioned raising taxes numerous times, and there is no way that I will join you in raising taxes on the city and the citizens of Finland. I'm just stating that.
But what
If
we
you want to raise taxes, take that banner and run with it. I for one will not be supporting that position.
Okay,
It's actually in the strategic plan that we're coalesced around the 1%.
I know, but the strategic plan, God love it, it's floating still. I just would like to know, like, are we thinking about all of the bigger picture? When you're sitting here in appropriations, I don't want to raise taxes. I don't want to do a part that we end up getting into these other things down the road that we have to do.
Understood. No, I think this is part of our long-term plan. This is why we have a 5-year plan out there and where these dollars fit in that. So it's pretty easy to open up that spreadsheet and see where that money's gonna come from. Based on projections. Well, Holly, don't shake your head.
I didn't shake my head.
That's where it is.
I just asked you, would you raise taxes? That's all I'm asking you,
No.
if it came down
My
to
answer
it.
is no.
Okay, that's what I'd like to hear from appropriations.
I'm not gonna
If we
raise
have to dial it back
We'll
and
dial it back,
and
figure
yeah.
out another way.
overspend on the design
We already
plan,
had this discussion, strategic plan.
I'm
We're
glad.
not doing that.
Were we thinking of making a motion to appropriate this 30% design money today?
Well, the one question yes, at some point we need to make a motion for something. I agree. Mayor,
That I was
on
clear.
do we need to appropriate all 1.5 million right off the bat? What's the payment schedule look like to get this done over time?
I apologize, I haven't looked at the specifics of the payments broken down for a little bit. I believe the main key is, I think we would need to appropriate at least $750,000 would be my ask to Jay, just so it gives me a little time to confirm. But the big thing is entering into the contract for the design services.
Excuse me, I have a comment there. Depending on the language of the contract, the contract obligates us to all 3 components, all 3 phases. Or if the contract obligates us to 1.5 million, you have to appropriate the entire period. So that could be 4 million. So the language of the contract matters. If you enter into a $1.3 million contract,
So Jeff, what I would want,
you gotta appropriate it.
Understood.
what I think the motion should be is supporting the entering into the contract for the design services. I'm not gonna have it on Wednesday's meeting since, it's already kind of late for Denise to put that together. And then I can get the full contract language to you all for review and discuss that with the auditor. But I think then the recommendation just can be to authorize entering into the agreement for the design.
You can't enter into an agreement with them, again, without the appropriation.
So, but do we need to specify the specific dollar amount in the motion today? Okay, well then I would request that it be the 1.5.
And I would, again, qualify that saying the agreement requires you to enter into the next 2 phases of that.
We could amend the legislation
That's not
as,
appropriate.
Why would we be appropriate?
You have to appropriate the entire amount you plan on spending. You can't obligate yourself to spend more money. In other words, if it's a $4 million design agreement, you have to appropriate $4 million. I think it would be wise to
Okay,
present and the argument I've been making for 3 months now to this body is you should not be appropriating $1 unless you see the agreement. In other words, you need to know what the heck you're signing. and agree, if it's already negotiated, it should be available for us
I'm
to
pretty
see.
sure I sent it all to you guys
I
about
don't
6 months ago.
I don't know. Yeah,
You raised your hands.
I don't, that footbridge was donated to the city, one across the river now,
Now,
We,
pretty sure.
we did reach out to the historical museum and ask for
It's been there like
information.
12, 15 years.
Actually, it's older than that. I actually have the history of that because I reached out to the historical museum and I have the history of the articles of when it was built, when it was brought in, and I can't recite it, but I have it. It's actually kind of a cool read. So yeah, it is, there is no, and I asked about the historical value of moving it, and the historic museum or our association had no issue with it being removed if there was improvements made to that area.
And we did also check if it could be relocated as a pedestrian bridge somewhere else. That was kind of cost prohibitive and there wasn't really a spot that made
Well,
sense.
didn't Bob Nichols, when he was councilman, donate that? Maybe Burt Rail was in on that?
I don't remember.
I thought
We,
Bob Nichols
again, we
told me.
read that 6 months ago. I didn't, I should have refreshed myself on
I'll
that.
pull that up. I'll
We can
share.
afford it to
But,
you.
you know, it's no big deal. I was just curious about how it was.
bridge.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I know.
And I don't know where they got it.
Yeah, it was brought in from somewhere else and.
is it in Old Kentucky? There's certain bridges where there's a requirement. It sounds like this isn't one of them. We have to go up and we have to get people to come get them.
Well, somebody can have it if I want it.
Oh, there's a lot of scrap.
There's a lot of scrap metal.
We should make some money off that. Chip, I would suggest that you address appropriating the necessary funds for the phase twos and how you plan on doing it. If you're going to do it for a type both together, it does not make sense to do one without that. Things jointly, so the public knows what approach the size way.
Wasn't that what the $50,000 figure was for?
But we hadn't really discussed it, but yes, you're right. That's what the mayor had suggested 50, up to 50.
I'd like to, I don't think 50 is going to cover you as big as the area is. I mean, because the money you're talking about was for the 4 lots up on, off of 40th Street for
Whichever properties you want, because I'm
No,
not
I'm asking,
concerned about it.
I'm asking if that was worth the 17,000. Because that was a small area.
17 was a different property.
You're probably looking closer to 100,000 for phase threes.
I think it would be wise to invest some money in Riverside Park, make it more inviting for people, thin the trees out, plant some grass. We could do that within a year and a half. See what happens. We're going to put a lot of money into that park. And I'm on appropriations committee. Everybody here isn't, but I cannot appropriate taxpayers' money that much for design because nobody said, great, do it to me. I had more constituents against this. Where's the money coming from? What happens if something happens to the water treatment plant? What happens if something happens to the other plant? And
Different funds.
Right. And our sidewalks are falling apart. They walk in the mall now just because I live in an older part of town, but we really need to look into some sidewalk situations here.
Sidewalks are the property owner's responsibility.
That's my opinion. I understand. At one time, the city had to deal with them. You know, putting them in or city labor, if they put concrete or something like that, so I just can't. I just can't spend taxpayers' money like that.
So Jim, what would you suggest happens to this property then?
It's a good idea. I haven't thought of it. But it's like me, I've been in business, you know, for 40 years. And things that I did, I mean, I wouldn't invest that much. You know, I wouldn't invest 50,000 thinking, well, man, I might buy that property to put it in the store. You know, I've got to have a year or two to think about it. And I've dealt with environmental issues on a property I had. And just because of lead-based painting. Had to cut me out of alignment, cost me money I didn't want to spend. You know, it's just like it came back okay, but that's just things that I think about. I might be the oldest one to live. I don't know. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. I appreciate it.
I have something. I think this project is going to pay so many dividends for this town going forward. We've heard about it with the economic stuff, with recruitment of people to come in to work at our businesses. That's going to be something that goes on for decades. And I think we're being short-sighted if we say, I wouldn't even put $50,000 into this. This is something that is going to be, I think, very transformative for our downtown. So I am in favor of moving forward with this project.
I am too, and I think that we have gotten a lot of positive comments. We've got several emails just this week that have been positive. Now, I've heard some stuff from people asking, that's not a question. They've said, I don't really have a problem with the park, the building in the park would probably be a good idea, blah, 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 but gee, what do we do about somebody taking care of the parks that we have? The example that was given to me by the person that told me that said he went with his wife to have a picnic and they took a crock pot out to, I'm assuming, Riverside to one of the shelter houses or whatever, and the electric didn't work. And I'm like, well, I think that could be directed to people to take care of our maintenance, and I don't know if more money needs to be put towards that, but I don't think that whatever that would take away from I feel we should.
Yeah,
It's-
and
If I may, just
Yeah.
high level, to your point, I've recently received some concerns about areas in community parks that people assume that they are city parks or city responsibility for maintenance. And some of the things that I've had to research are not the city's responsibility, but we are working with the other entities to get those resolved.
Well,
So-
that was my question, and I should probably know this, but is the Hancock, that's a
Park
Hancock
district.
County Park District, right? That's a county thing
Yes,
that does,
there's,
like the thing that I mentioned?
yes.
Well, that's,
Well, I don't know the specific location you're referring to,
oh,
but
well,
there are areas within our city that are, people assume are city responsibility when in fact they're not. So if we can talk offline about that specific area.
Yeah.
But- and I don't know exactly,
Sure.
but still, that's really been the only specific, I got a call from someone who said she was just against it altogether, but I agree with Josh, sorry, slipped my mind there for a moment, that I think that's short-sighted to just not want to spend any money you have to put money in to get benefits out. That's just the way it is. So that's my thoughts and what I heard.
I guess since everybody else is talking, that's the thought too.
That would be great.
I have not had any contacts that have been against this. People that have contacted me says that something needs to be done here. They really like the idea. A lot of the younger people that have said they would love to have something downtown like this because, it's not for me, but the younger crowd is looking to be where they're working and being downtown. Having amenities like this close to them. It's, like I say, it's not for me to live downtown. Most of you do. I've had nothing but positive things about it. Now, of course, the cost was always been brought up. The worst thing that happened is when we came out with the 10 to 40 million, because then nobody hears 10 million. Everybody hears 40 million. And all this, they assume that that's what we're going to spend. I think, with the discussions that we've had, that number really is not even in the thoughts.
If we don't do diamond highlights on the bridge, we may be able to bring that down, and I think but sorry, that was my best sarcastic comment to that. But based on what, they might look really nice though, but based on what Grant said, if we don't even get started with something to give us the plan so that we can decide whether we want copper or diamonds later, we'll never get there.
I think you need to know what you want to put in, and I think by doing the design, you can pick and choose what you want this thing to look like. These are pretty pictures, but is that really what we want to have as our final project?
But if you don't know if you want that, should it go back to Park and Rec and reevaluate? That's all I was saying, because that was less in your
Park
cost.
is already given.
Yeah, Park and Rec.
Park
is
and
all-
Rec. Well, I won't fully agree on that, but you just said it, everybody wants something there. Concerns I hear are the costs. The concerns I hear about homelessness and people, how are we gonna manage that, or who's gonna maintain it? But it's what people want. People saw all the pie in the sky, we're like, yeah, we want all these things, we think we want them. But if we dial it back and hone in a little bit better, can we accomplish the first phase? Because some of this stuff is further out, that it's not right against the benching. And that can change, especially if it takes us 5 years. There could be a different mayor, a different council, a different economic development, a whole different thing happening in our community.
Agreed. Okay. So question for the mayor and for Rob. When we talked about this initially, the most pressing matter was when we start moving dirt, clean dirt, that we want to be able to put the dirt in the place where we want it based on a plan for the overall park later
Or
on.
excavate additional dirt in certain places.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just moving stuff, not necessarily meaning that, could end up just moving it in that place and we never do anything. Holly, you're right, we may go broke, we can't do it.
That's true.
That's what you were saying.
No.
But my point is, so to get us to that point where we know where we want the dirt to be, can we do this with the contract we currently have? And is it the 1.5 or is it less? Because to me, that's the next pressing issue. So we don't have to move dirt twice. Because Rainick's gonna, or not Rainick, excuse me, Stantec's gonna come in here and make really nice straight lines, right? They're gonna do exactly what they do. 0 feet, 5 feet, 10 feet, I'm done, we're out. Correct?
Yeah, I think we need to stick with the 30% design. Again, going back to, we need to get, just as Grant was saying, we need to get a design put together for us to have a clear understanding, to be able to refine the design, to be able to bring in external dollars. I think it would be short-sighted if we just said, yeah, you know what, we kind of think we want that skate park there, so how would you cut it down an additional 2 feet? Or yeah, we want to be able to, put a bridge there, so I think that wouldn't make sense.
I think that design that we're referring to will also give us the ability to scale down costs. If at the end, that's where we make a decision, all right, let's scale this down, but the elaborate design at the beginning will help find that.
And I don't think that the cost difference in identifying that is significant.
So the contract, as what Jim was saying, we need to look and see what that is, what does that, how is that written such that are we constrained to? What is that, how is that read? Do we have an out clause at some point in time?
I remember I did have this like that.
Oh, boy, okay.
That's actually just, that's not the full, that's just scope.
It's just.
Yeah, there's gonna have to be there's gonna have to be a fiscal officer certificate.
Right.
All right, never mind. I thought I found it. But I know I do have a copy of it, because I think I previously sent it out to,
I'm sorry,
no, it's okay. I was
go
just
ahead.
saying. No, I do have the draft copy, so I will make sure to circulate that. I thought I had previously sent that out way back when I first came to you all.
And so we need to take a look at that. Also, we'll ultimately just do payments to, I'm sorry, what company? was it?
Strand.
Strand, thank you. We would make payments over time with them, correct?
I believe so.
It's not, we're not gonna write them a check for 1.5 and send it to them. That better not be how we're doing
I
it.
don't believe so. I don't have that off the top of my head. I'm sure
There's
there
gotta be a
is
payment schedule, quarterly or something
but
laid
yeah,
out.
but going back to the auditor, if we sign the contract, we would still
But
appropriate it.
you still have to appropriate.
Understood, Jim, but depending on how the contract is written. So we always have the ability, have we signed the contract?
No.
Okay, so we have the ability to go back and also work with them on that schedule also.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Just trying to see where the flex points are here. So what I would suggest is that I would like to make a motion that we recommend appropriating up to $100,000 for phase 2 testing based on the process that is going to happen over the next months with Stantec and the benching process. Also, I would suggest that we, after review of the contract, that we would appropriate up to $750,000 for the initial portion of this. Because we can make payments on this, because we'll need to, once we see the contract there and how the payment schedule works, we can always appropriate more later.
But if-
No, go ahead.
Sorry,
That was my suggestion. Open for
If you're gonna pay 750 and you know you're gonna pay the other 750 later, it just seems like it would make more sense to me to just.
We don't
But
have
I shouldn't have,
we
sorry.
don't have to spend it all at once anyways. So
Right, it's
why not
just-
do 1.5 million?
Comments?
Are you pulling funds from, because I know there was talk about $10 or were you gonna request?
Demolition. You could
Or
do the
the
100,000, you could do the 100,000 from the demolition funds that were set aside, but the project itself is general
ARPA
fund.
funds?
Yeah.
ARPA funds, I'm sorry, I didn't know what demo dollars were.
The demolition funds are in dollars.
I get it now,
No, I like that idea too, the 100,000 from ARPA.
Since nobody seconded his motion, do you wanna, make a
I
motion
will.
with the 100,000 from the ARPA and the
I'll say to
1.5?
amend his motion already. So amend it so that the 100,000 comes from the ARPA dollars. And I'll second it.
It's for phase 2.
But do we, his emotion only had $750,000.
Oh,
So,
sorry. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, you guys just, I mean, you,
Like I said, I think I misspoke. I guess I'm not allowed to tell you what to put in your motion, but I don't know.
It's just out on the
I said
table for
something.
discussion at this
Sorry,
point.
but
I say
yeah.
appropriate the $1.5 million for the design. And then 100,000 from the ARPA funds for the phase 2 testing.
So the motion on the table is 100,000, recommend appropriation of $100,000, up to 100,000 for phase 2 testing in the benching area or the properties that will ultimately be acquired by the city. Jim, does that?
Don't say up to, it's appropriate.
Thank you. It's got to be a specific amount. Got it. Okay. Taken from ARPA dollars.
ARPA dollars.
And we also recommend the 1.5 for development plan pending review of the contract.
By this committee,
I would say by this committee. That's a motion.
Can you just say 30%?
No, it to be a specific dollar.
Yeah, there's a specific dollar.
But that's only for a stage. Are you saying you're only gonna put 1.5 for the total
it'll be the
design?
contract like.
Right. I'll second that.
You don't have to give the full-
Motion then second. Well,
Second.
okay. Any further discussion?
Wait a second, you got.
Yeah.
But
Go ahead, Beth.
I don't want to be real picky. But can he make the motion? He's not on appropriations.
I'm appropriate.
Oh, I get confused sometimes
Yeah,
between.
these two guys are. Holly is not.
Okay, my bad.
Brian's not.
Yeah, I know you're not. I'm sorry. Because I knew you were
You
on
two
parks.
are.
I got confused.
Grant is
I'm
not.
both, yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. We're good. It's hard to tell sometimes.
Yes.
AARP.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Sure, well, they want to give it to us, we let it
I'll take that money.
Use your golden Buckeye card for that. You gotta allow
So,
Okay, read on.
the first, I
All
wrote
right,
the first one
quiet,
is
please.
appropriate $100,000 for phase 2 testing for properties in benching area that will ultimately be owned by the city to be drawn from ARPA funds. And then the second motion was
Oh.
Appropriate 1.5. Got the rest of their job.
From the general fund.
General fund.
From general fund. Based on review, subject to review of the contract by the appropriation.
That 100,000, are we actually doing phase 2 stuff with that, or are we just making that money available in case the county needs it, which is what I thought somebody originally said.
I think that goes back to, we got the money available, once it's appropriated, then I think it does go back to the administration to work with the commissioners through this process to make sure that we feel good, that we have mitigated our risk in purchasing these properties and the property that we've already purchased.
Yeah, we'll reach out to a couple of different environmental firms and work with them to identify what, if any, additional properties based off of the documents and their reviews need a phase 2 to be completed, to be comfortable with moving forward. We'll bring it back to the group.
So the second one got written as appropriate $1.5 million from the general fund, subject to review of contract by the Appropriations Committee for parking design services.
Is that
Sounds great.
Jim?
But I was gonna say to Christina, it's unusual for me to make this type of request, but because of the potential for significant liability, I think part of that process. Screws.
All right, I'll see you on the email.
Maybe we just assume you'll have a meeting at some point.
Not necessarily. Most of the time, we contract them, tell them what parcels to go to, what the estimated cost is gonna be. They go out and complete their reports, they provide them to us, and we send them.
Well, I would,
But we're gonna be in contact with the commissioners also through this
Yeah.
process.
I would envision you just hand phase 1s. So here's the phase 1, so here's the benching area. Where should we be doing phase 2s based on this phase 1?
We'll
That's what I
see,
know.
we've got it under control.
No problem.
Okay, all right. Does anybody need me to reread this? Anybody on the committee?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All those in favor of these two recommendations signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion passes. I will pass this written up. Thank you, Mr. Russell. I'm going to pass this around. Please sign before you leave today. Any other discussion before we close the meeting?
Just one item of note, I will send you guys, I think I have the contract, so I will try to get that to you guys in the next couple of days. And then I'll talk to Councilman Wiltshire to try to call a meeting on Wednesday for your next appropriations meeting, so we can keep this moving.
Very good. Thank you.
Like pre-strategic planning and
You
pre-council.
know, I'm gonna have to look at my schedule, that things are a little wonky at the moment. But yeah, here in the next. couple
Okay,
of
because I thought you might want to get it done before council. I was wondering when we were
Yeah.
Yes. Any other discussion? We will call this meeting closed. Thank you.